I want to mention, please keep yourself muted so that it just makes the whole process easier until you're asked to unmute to ask your questions or make your comments. Put those questions and comments in the chat, and that makes it easier for us to organize that part of the conversation today, and we'll call on you. You'll get your voice in and you'll get your questions in, and everybody gets called on. So put them in the chat and we'll get to you in a minute. And then next week's Messy Conversation happens to fall on Trans Remembrance Day, November 20th. And so we've got two former students of ours at AULA, Kyle Sawyer and Chris Salamanca, who are going to be in conversation around Trans Remembrance Day. So that'll be a terrific conversation. I know both of these persons really well, and I'm very excited that we have a chance to be in conversation with them. So with that, one other announcement. Each week now I've opened with some comment about what's going on in Gaza and Israel and other related violence around the world. In large measure because of how this is affecting students in classes. That's where I see this so strongly every week. We were discussing these things last week in my classes, and one of two things came up. One was the moral injury of witnessing, being a witness to mass violence. And I thought that was a very insightful perspective that students brought to this, that's part of the grief that they're carrying, is that moral injury. And then we talked about the grieving and that you don't need to do this alone. You're part of this community. And so that leads me to an announcement that this coming Friday, November 17th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, some of our faculty from Seattle, Sarah Beth, Lori, and Cece Briggs, are going to be hosting a candlelight vigil that you are welcome to join via Zoom as a chance to collectively grieve this mass violence. So all you need to do is log on to your Antioch Zoom account and you'll find your way there. With that, I'm going to get out of the way and let Clarence start the show.
On my soul. Many suggestions and documents written. When time can't depend on no one else.
Oh, yeah. And what about the red man who met you at the coast? You never did sharing, always had to have the most. And what about Mississippi, the boundary of old? Tell me who'll pay reparations on my soul? Yeah.
Thank you, Gil Scott Herring, for that wonderful I'm sorry, for that wonderful song, Who Will Pay Reparations for My Soul? Reparations for the hundreds of thousands who died while crossing the Middle Passage. Reparation for the unknown ones raped and maimed and still made it through. Reparation for the thousands left hanging in a tree like strange fruit in the darkness of night. Reparations for surviving inhumane treatment and forced medical experimentation. Reparations for the untold numbers of Black folk clubbed down while peacefully demonstrating. Reparations for the pregnant mothers who bore the force of brutal water hoses. Reparations for the children who never got to see mama or daddy. Reparations for the countless numbers of Black men fighting in every war for America, coming home to be devalued, disrespected, dishonored. Reparations for the redlined Black neighborhoods transformed into ghettos for greed. Reparations for the Fannie Lou Hamers who only wanted to vote. Reparations for the little children bombed in their homes and churches. Reparations for denial of education, first-class citizenship, fair housing, lack of jobs, medical care, and wealth. Reparations for the ancestors who were stolen, losing everything a human can possess. Reparations, reparations, restitution. I am Clarence R. Williams, Jr., for any home folk who bothered to come on. I am happy to be able to introduce our two panelists today. You've heard their names, the Reverend Dr. David M. Moore, who has been on with us several times in the past. We're trying to snatch him in to be on our planning committee, but we haven't been successful. But we do know we're twisting his arm to come back yet again for another conversation that we're working on him with. But Dr. David is a theologian, a humanitarian, a writer, and an adjunct professor for this country and abroad. And he's gifted us today with introducing us to Matt Lowe, who is the founder of CUREJ, which is pronounced Courage, which is an organization that organizes faith-centric communities in an effort to make reparations. So he's coming with a whole different toolbox that we've not been introduced to yet. And we're excited about the work he's doing and the lives he's changing and the minds he's changing. So before I invite them in, I am going to lend just a slight historical perspective. First and foremost, please understand that the formerly ex-enslaved people were the only people throughout the history of America who've not received any form of reparations. Yes, near the end of the Civil War, there was a person who decided that, you know, they needed to do something for all of the enslaved people that were actually participating with the Union Army to fight the war. So Field Order 15 was issued, which was 40 acres and a government broken down mule, which I'm still looking for mine, but anyway. But in my most recent research, to my chagrin, I thought I knew who the first people were to actually sue for reparations in America, and it turned out that I stumbled upon something recently that I did not know, but in 1781, Mum Bet in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was a state that decided to rewrite their state constitution. And when they did, there was a loophole that she sued Massachusetts, the state of, for her freedom. And as it turned out, Dr. Gills, she's actually the great grandmother of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I'm sure you knew that, but I did not until most recently. The second person who sued for reparations, who also won, was in 1878. Henrietta Woods was a free woman who was tricked from Ohio, which was a free state, into Kentucky, then to Mississippi, and then to Virginia, where she actually sued the government, and she won her case, and she was awarded $23,000. And the final person who sued for reparations was quite a nemesis to the government. Her name was Callie House, and I thought Callie House was the first and only one to start this ball rolling, but she was not, as you've just heard. Callie House created an organization called the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief and Bounty and Pension Association. That's a lot of words. She sued for reparations against the U.S. Treasury Department for $68 million for forced labor and servitude from 1862 to 1868. And during that time, 68 million was what the government was rewarded on taxes from cotton. So she had a real good case, but she lost. So the next year they came after her, arrested her for mail fraud, and she actually spent a year in prison. So that is our historical context from the domestic standpoint. We have had a reparations messy conversation in the past, but it was from a global perspective. So today we're extra excited because today we're dealing with America herself. So I give it to you, Matt.
All right, thanks, Clarence. Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
All right, just making sure everything sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much for Henrietta Woods. A lot of people don't call that out. Callie House, there's a great book on Callie House and reparations. I did not know Mum Beck, so here we are. I'm still learning things, y'all, and we're hopefully we'll be learning things here today too. And the international or the UN International Conference on Reparations is really important too. So I'm glad y'all had that context. That took place in 2009 in Durban, South Africa, I believe. If I have my dates and locations correct. Some things that I like to bring about is reparations is just a short word for reparative justice. So that's what we're really talking about, healing for harm that was done. It comes from a restorative justice framework, which asked what is the greatest amount of healing for harm that was done. In America, as it was said, 40 acres and meal was one effort that was made for reparations. And as many of y'all know, it was taken back, it was stolen back, it was eliminated, the land was dispossessed, it was already unlivable land. It was generally marsh land that was given unfarmable And as was poignantly said, the mule was an old governmental mule. But in the reparative conversation in the United States, it's been quite fraught, as many of you know, and kind of consensus. So this is a sensitive conversation in our nation. There's been many poignant articles, most famously by David Horowitz, who came out with the 10 arguments against reparations about 10 years ago now. And that really kind of started it. And Ta-Nehisi Coates, came out famously with his long form article in the Atlantic called The Case for Reparations. And that really kind of got us to where we are now. And in 2017, there was a national convening of reparations leaders that met in North Carolina. And they hosted, and they're like, well, what do we do? The reparations, HR 40 had been on the books for going on 20 years by this point, almost 25 years. And HR 40 is was a congressional legislation to study the need for reparations. So just to study, not for reparations, just to study. And it didn't get passed for close to, I think, 40 years. It's still going. So I think it's close to 40 years now.
And just to Matt, on that, the congressman from Michigan,
yes,
was the one who first introduced it. Conyers was his name.
Yep.
Each year he introduced this throughout until the end of his career as a congressman.
Mm-hmm.
And now, of course, Miss Jackson, I shouldn't say Miss, I should say Congresswoman Jackson from Texas has carried it on with the help in the Senate by Cory Booker, I'm sorry. So they are trying to carry that torch still, but your friend Mitch McConnell doesn't feel it's necessary.
Yeah. Whiteness dies hard. So that took us to 2017, and what they met and they convened for was, yes, organizing needed to happen, education needed to happen, but what came out of that was they said we need to have local healing centers, because what happens when national reparations comes down is we need implementation. And so they saw what happened in Canada, they saw what happened in South Africa, and what happened in each of those areas is the rural areas weren't met. It was just in these big metropolitan areas, and reparations didn't really go anywhere and extend and didn't have systemic transformation. And for reparations to really take place, transformative justice needs to be applied, and that needs to include everybody to transition the power system to ensure and commit that harm does not repeat. And so that was the call in 2017, and that brings us kind of to the current moment. There's been small acts of reparations in Rosewood after a massacre. In Tulsa, there's active push for reparations in cases. There was a case that didn't make it through the Supreme Court this past year. There's smaller efforts across the nation right now. In Asheville, North Carolina, there's one locally that just happened up the coast. In kind of the Central Coast area, they're creating a marine sanctuary for that's led by indigenous Chumash people. So there's stuff happening locally. Even there's reparations that took place at a beach down in what is now known Manhattan Beach in California, and land was returned there to a Black family that used to own that land. So reparations is, as many of you know, Japanese people were paid, some argue, a small amount of reparations in 1988 for the internment camps during World War II. So reparations, there are precedents for reparations in our country, and the UN has declared a path for reparations and has considered it and laid out that the United States has significantly broken human rights law with Jim Crow, with slavery, with colonization, and so reparations are due by what is deemed by the UN court. So I'll stop it there. I'm gonna set the floor for David to talk a little bit, and saying that the first reason for enslavement and colonization on this land was because of Christianity. So that's something that Christian churches have not dealt with. And we, as many descendants, whether we identify as Christian, we are in a Christian dominant land. So the first excuse for enslavement was that one was not Christian. It wasn't that they were black or white, it was that they were not Christian. And the first excuse for colonization was that they were not, is that indigenous people were not Christian. So I'm going to let David expand a little bit more from there.
Thank you, Matt, for setting me up. And thank you, Clarence, for your poetry and for your research findings. Well, yeah, starting 500 years ago, Europeans conquered much of the world, most of the world, the Americas, Africa, much of Asia, and countless islands. And I see 4 primary gifts that they gave the world. And I say gifts with irony. Number 1, language. It's amazing how many places you can move, at least semi-freely, if you speak one of 3 colonial languages. And number 2 of the gifts that were given to the world is history. And when you have history, you have the culture of whatever history you know. And so, you know, my friend Sally likes to joke about how she was born in Guyana, and she likes to joke how she knows more about the Battle of Hastings in Europe in 1066 than she does about her Guyanan history. The third gift is capitalism, because why not? When the world only speaks your language and only knows your history, why not exploit them economically? And then the fourth one is religion. Religion. In his book, The Christian Imagination, Theology, and the Origins of Race, Yale professor Willie James Jennings focuses on the impact of 2 figures historically, the priest and the soldier. The roles of the priest and the soldier are central to his exploration of how theological concepts and practices have contributed to the construction of racial categories and the oppression of marginalized groups in the context of colonization. This marriage of violent racist militarism with sacredness is what created this system and demands a fuller interrogation of religion, white religion in the United States, when you think of whom they go to bed with. That's the soldier. For me, this means the problem is spiritual. It is why when my dear sister Anna at Antioch reached out to me with the gracious invitation to choose a topic for messy conversations, I said, beyond reparations, because spiritual problems begged to be addressed spiritually. In fact, in May of 1969 at Riverside Church in New York City, this church that was made more famous after Dr. King made his anti-war position more famous, this same church was visited by James Foreman, who had for 5 years served as executive secretary of the Student Nonviolent Committee. Differently, however, from Dr. King, James Foreman was not an invited guest at Riverside Church. Foreman commandeered the Sunday service, walking to the pulpit and reading these words: "We, the Black people assembled in Detroit, Michigan for the National Black Economic Development Conference, are fully aware that we have been forced to come together because racist white America has exploited our resources, our minds, our bodies, our labor. We have helped to build the most industrial country in the world." And this Black manifesto goes on to propose a plan worth $500 million aimed at establishing a national Black labor strike and defense fund, a national welfare rights organization, a Southern land bank, and 4 publishing and printing industries that would serve as an alternative to the white dominant printing fields. The document also urged white Christians and Jews to practice the nonviolence that they preached. Foreman had been dissatisfied with the influence of the church in civil rights for a long time. So for me, as it was for James Foreman, our reality is a religious problem. And the problem is a problem of sacralizing militarism. And I'd like to credit my indigenous friend, Linda Kikiewicz, for her lucid analysis, which helps me to see how spiritual the problem really is. In this undeclared war on Blackness, those who can achieve varying levels of U.S. freedom paradoxically require both the death and the continued existence of Black people. They require the death of Black people as a constant reminder of the horror of what it means to be Black, of what it means to be unfree. They require the existence of Black people as the inferior referent against which they can affirm themselves as superior, against which they affirm themselves as free to make their lives free to live at all. Thus, insofar as Americans understand themselves to be free and their freedoms to have been inherited, the refrain, "I never owned any slaves," should now sound strange. For to enjoy these freedoms, Americans don't need to have ever owned even one slave. To be free, Americans only need to ensure that the condition of slaveness continue to persist. Debates focusing less on the why of reparations and more on the how often suggest that integrating Black people into capitalism through monetary payments can help make amends for the country's historical destruction of Black life. The U.S. has a ready figure for how much a human life is worth: $10 million. Its economists came up with that number after calculating that on average, U.S. workers in the most dangerous jobs earn an extra $1,000 a year for accepting to take a 1 in 10,000 chance of being killed. Paying 10,000 workers each that additional $1,000 costs the corporation $10 million. Thus, what a corporation is willing to pay for the permission to take a life is the figure the government uses to decide what a human life is worth. And that a corporation gets to decide this tells us something about what capitalist governments and societies mean when they talk about human life. It helps to capitalize the H when speaking about capital's human to help clarify it is less about a biological species and more of a figure of its own invention. Tied to the concept of the free modern subject, capital's human is similarly a structural position of superiority that finds its meaning against what its founding philosophers decided would be its inferior opposite. So I'm almost done here. But first, let me just say, earlier today, I was nearly moved to tears when I received this message from the same Dr. Kikiewicz in response to my inquiry. She says, I think in a sentence, the liberatory indigenous proposal toward reparations would be the annihilation of the human/non-human structure of the above/below, which means the annihilation of the white/black structure of human relations, the annihilation of any human relations that relate to the other, those different as anti or antithesis. Anyway, from relating to difference competitively and toward complementary difference, it would mean that in practice, we would have to affirm our closeness to nature rather than our fear, disgust, and domination of the planet. So let me close with this. I recently heard and agree that this racial capital system intentionally divides people on the economic fringes. I don't think that any of us has a chance. If not merge, we need to at least consult one another, the African and the indigenous, because it could be that the most realistic solution could be the spiritual solution. And this is why in several cities around the country, white churches are moving on this, in some cases leading the reparations conversations in their communities. And one might argue, well, it's just talk though. And before we agree or disagree on that, we must factor, as I close, the integrity and courage white clergy need to violate the one taboo in the most holy of white spaces, that's the white church, to commit the greatest of sins, that is to mention just one of two words, white and supremacy, or if you say them together, it's cataclysmic. So this challenges their foundational myth that their religion told them what is right is wrong and what is wrong is right. And so there's a reason that we Black folks, no matter how often it happens, are legitimately shocked when a white person actually sees us. So me, rather than poo-pooing the movement of white churches and synagogues at least talking about reparations, I call for more of you white churches, more of you white religious organizations, because you are still, after 500 years, providing cover for militarism and genocide, especially against people who look like me. So I call for more of you to speak up, even if your voice shakes, because part of the grief that we carry is the moral injury. So we're invested in a voice-shaking dream, and we're energized by it. We're empowered by it.
Mm-hmm.
27th is your birthday.
Mm-hmm.
David, two things I need to share with you. First of all, I have a white friend who told me recently that his family had no slaves, but they had a couple on layaway. Secondly, I just wanted to let you know that during our pandemic around COVID, Black economists, they let the world know that if she could find $2 trillion in just a matter of days, she could certainly find the $12 trillion for reparations. So Matt, all of what the Right Reverend Dr. David gave us, can you share with us some things from your toolbox on how again to repair, restore?
Yeah, so there, just to update the number, the biggest number I've heard recently is $36 trillion. That was by Joseph Ogletree, the late Joseph Ogletree. I believe he was at Princeton. But anyways, the number is actually not important. I don't really talk compensatory. It's going to happen one way or another, I think, as far as money, because that's the way the system goes. So what we need to do is address, as David is pointing, the moral aspect of it. In addition, there's a reparative model that has been set forth through a restorative lens. And there's something called the satisfactory phases, in which we as everyday folk can engage in. Often we like to think of the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions as the reparations process, made famous by Desmond Tutu. They had Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in Canada for First Nations people. And in that process, the truth part is for the people that experience the oppression. And the truth is for the purpose of the transformative justice part, the part that changes the systems, that makes the demands. And so that's something that happens in panels, in caucuses, in group committee meetings, in long processes where the demands and the needs are drawn up. And so to come to you today and say, this is what we need, I can't do that for you today. And I don't think David can start at it, but I don't think we can do that in this time today. But what we can do is we can do the satisfactory phases, which is there's 5 different aspects to it, which is reckon. What we need to recognize, which is what we're doing here. We're recognizing, hey, this is an issue, but we can also do this as individuals. And then what we need to do is to re-educate. So many of you may have heard of like a people's history or like a Howard Zinn kind of thing. How do we understand not just this history of whiteness, but how do we understand the people's history? Another famous author is Ronald Takaki. He wrote a book called Of a Different Mirror. Or a Christian imagination. How do we understand the racial implications rooted in our Christian domination systems? And so there's James Cone is another one that brings note to that, in addition to the author that David spoke of. The next phase is called demonumentalizing. As you may recall, there was a lot of talk around taking down conservative monuments. I believe it was just reported that there was 136 renaming of military sites in the United States this past year. 9 of those which are Air Force bases, and some 112, I think, were Army bases, and then naval bases. And so that's one example. But what do we, if our churches are monuments of enslavability, of white supremacy, of colonization, then how do we address that? If our universities are monuments of white supremacy, colonization, enslavability, then what are we doing about that? Because in this town, that is very true. In this town of Santa Barbara, in Los Angeles, in Seattle, Chief Seattle is a very important figure up in the Pacific Northwest, where I know many of you are calling in from. Los Angeles, there's such a long legacy. And even here in Santa Barbara. So we have the Chumash, and we have a famous mission here that was very directly marched people up what we call Santa Barbara Street now, from the lower west side to the mission. And that's, they now call that Santa Barbara Street. And ironically, there are churches, many churches that line that street. And I wonder why churches line that street. Churches historically are the moral witness. They are the thing of right and wrong, and the choice to be silent in the presence of moral reckoning is we need to change that. And so this idea of being comfortable with violence, in what Martin Luther King called the positive presence of peace and the negative presence of peace. So that is a part of the reparation work in the form of demonumentalizing, because we as individuals can be monuments of white supremacy. The next step is undoing harmful policy. We see a lot of that happening at our Congress level, at our city level, looking at our police commissions, looking at just land holdings. How do we understand redlining? Excuse me, redlining and restrictive covenants. Those are very important, as a lot of the history is kind of starting to show us. Mass incarceration and all those ways that are set up to excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink of water. The way those have been set up to perpetuate white supremacy. But the final part is truth-telling. And I mentioned earlier that truth-telling was for the people that have experienced the harm, and to name the oppression, their oppressive experience. There is a truth-telling part for the people that have experienced the harm. And actually, David here was a part of that, and he really illuminated this for me when I was doing my studies on this. He went to Standing Rock, and at Standing Rock they had a recanting of the doctrine of discovery, which was the religious document that made right way for colonization, for the conquering and relinquishing of the lands and of the people. And they invited religious leaders out to Standing Rock to recant the doctrine of discovery. And this is what I call a repentance ceremony for local leaders, for local healing ceremonies to take place. We need to have a repentance ceremony, a recanting of the harm that was done. We need to commit to change. We need to name the harm that has taken place, that we see, that we have been a part of. We name our commitment moving forward, and we repent of what has been done. And then we come back and we do that time and time again, and we continue to build networks. We continue to make our healing stronger, because the restorative justice question is, what is the next greatest step of healing? And we continue to take that posture until healing is made.
So, Matt, when you go into white spaces to do this work, what is your first tactic? Which of those pillars do you use as a so-called breaker, or just a prelude to the work? How do you address those spaces when you begin this work?
I de-escalate. A lot of people come into this very armed, very argumentative. So de-escalating it, breaking it down to from like biologically, you know, hey, this is everybody. And if I'm going in front of a group of other white folks, I go up there and say, I am racist. Like, I have to be the first person to demonstrate this is I am racist, and I still am. I'm not just saying that as a past tense. I am racist, and demonstrating that for other people to make it comfortable, make it an everyday thing, so they can see, hey, like, I'm still moving in these ways. I recognize I still am moving in these ways, and I've been at this work for 10 plus years. It's not something that we can just erase. It's not something just to sweep under the rug. And so de-escalation is the number one thing I do in there. Get people to recognize, to commit, to say, hey, yeah, I'm willing to change. I get them excited. I get them say, like, change is possible. Like, I show them ways of, like, hey, there's people in the community doing these things. It's not a hard, it's long, it's grueling, but it's joyful work. Coming together, it's very beautiful. The healing is powerful. It's very worthwhile.
So we would find McConnell, Mitch McConnell, and Steve Johnson, and DeSantos, all those wonderful people would be in that space for you to enact this work. That's a wonderful thing. So we've come to the time that we will open the floor up to our guests to ask questions. You can, post in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. Sarah Beth, are you checking the chat for us?
Yeah, I'm doing that. There's nothing there yet, but I have a question about what you're sharing. One of the things that I think about some of what was said is that this is not just an exercise that you can learn and try out. It's a whole way of shifting your thinking, and it's a whole way of really owning, as I think you have said, Matt, of owning as a white person, who am I, and how do I do this racist stuff still? How did that get embedded, and how do I understand that if I'm not in awareness about it, I'm not going to necessarily stop myself from doing it still. And I think often for me, that leads me to thinking about the harm that I perpetuate that I'm not aware of, even though I'm trying. And so I'm curious. I'm curious about what kinds of supports have you seen or have you created that can help white people continue to have conversations like this. And also I'm sure that David, your community building is always a part of this, but I think I'm just curious, like, building intentional spaces for white people to do the work, and to really acknowledge that they have to take that out into their social world, where they won't have support and they won't necessarily be reminded, or the number of times that microaggressions happen and nobody says anything, it's still that way. And I think when I reflect on things I've said during the day or last week or whatever, I can pinpoint some of that, but I'm just so appreciative of this conversational nature, and also, David, your inspirational call to action. It's got me all in the feels, but there's also some really logical, like, how do we maintain this work for ourselves, between us, and just try to take care of each other, I think.
Well, Sarah, let me just say, I appreciate that inquiry. And, there are groups, I'm thinking in particular of Surge, that, where white folks are challenging each other all the time to be more aware. But I would say perhaps the shortest distance between these 2 points is to serve in some kind of collective that is led by people of color, Black people in particular, because that's putting your body on the line, so to speak. And I don't mean, necessarily going into physically dangerous, directly dangerous circumstances, but there will be some psychologically challenging and spiritually challenging experience one will have, because it's a major shift from the standard way of being to be answerable in some way to Black leadership.
I'll say for white bodies also, the work of decolonizing, this doesn't get talked about too much, but I feel like this is a space where we can say it, is that white people were colonized also, that the Germanic people were colonized, they were colonized, the Swami people were colonized, that's the northern people, the reindeer people, the Irish were colonized, so there are yeah yeah, anyways, and so we are colonized bodies as well too. Yes, they're not on this land, not we're perpetuators of harm, but we have decolonizing to do. And one thing, decolonizing is the coming back to self and community. I'm inspired by the Lakota people, who were offered, I believe it was probably 40 years ago, I think it was, I think it was late 70s, early 80s, they were offered reparations, a compensatory amount for the Black Hills, which is the area where Mount Rushmore is.
The six chiefs.
The government offered them $30 million, I believe, at that time for the land, and they didn't take it. And instead, the government just put it in a fund, and the fund has continued to compound and compound and compound. And I believe it's over $30 billion now. And the Lakota people still won't take it because they say you cannot you cannot pay us for land. We do not see land as property. We are one with the land. The land is us and we are the land. And so the same thing for white folks and for everybody is that we cannot be separated as our thoughts and feelings or wrongs. We are each other. And so it's trust building. That's the work that community building is. And when we decolonize, we come into like, yeah, everybody will screw up in some way, but we are in the trust rebuilding business, so we come here in the reparative work. I call it building the beloved community in this 4-part framework that I have of this commitment letter, this repentance ceremony, and then the reparative work of engaging in expanding the reparative awareness. And there's a part in that the building the beloved community, the reason we have the public repentance ceremonies in very public ways is so that the community can see who is saying that, hey, I recognize my wrongs. I'm ready to do right, and I'm ready to restart the retrust building actions. Because what happened after, many of us after George Floyd, we went and read our how to be an anti-racist. We went and read our white fragilities. We went and read, Me and White Supremacy. We went and read all of our books, and we did it in our little silos, and it felt good, and we are more educated. We can have the conversations, but it didn't go anywhere. Because what happened is it didn't build trust back into the community. It just had a bunch of individuals that are now aware, and that awareness doesn't do anything unless we are changing the way we engage.
Well, do we have any other questions in the chat?
Kia has her hand up. Kia, would you like to ask your question?
Idea.
Hi. Yes. First, I just wanted to say thank you so much. My heart always just really goes to a place of sadness. But when I think about Bruce's Beach, so thank you for mentioning Bruce's Beach, because as a family therapist, I teach my students about that intergenerational, what happens intergenerationally when those opportunities are no longer able to be present for a family. and thinking about how, that was disrupted there. And, they did end up selling that land back to LA County, which will be helpful for the family, but who knows how many generations of enjoyment. And it's not just about money, right? It was the space to connect and be kinfolk and just be together. So that was, so I thank you for mentioning that. And I'm wondering about, I know there was a resurgence of the Poor People's Campaign.
Hey, yes.
And so I joined that, definitely. There's like a Long Island branch. So I just jumped onto that quickly. But I'm wondering if you see that as one of the ways that we can be active, or, that intersection between like the moral imperative and the calling on that, that continued calling in those religious leaders, as you talked about. And how do you see the Poor People's Campaign or the resurgence of it in possibly being a helpful way to take action?
Well, Matt and I both have been active in the Poor People's Campaign because of its, in our estimate, its legitimacy. We need advocacy groups like this in the world. And I thought it was genius for Reverend Dr. William Barber II to enter into the legacy of what Dr. King and his co-workers were planning back in 1968 that was, truncated and ultimately aborted. Because, many of the becauses. I don't have to start listing those things, but it's just a wonderful thing to see. William Barber, let me tell you, my wife and I, here we are in California, but 2 weeks ago, we were at Ebenezer Baptist Church where Raphael Warnock is the pastor. And, we were electrified by his resonance with the kind of reality that we rarely see in the U.S. Senate.
Thank you. I think that's one of the groups that could be shared out. I'll put the link in the chat for anyone here who is not familiar or who's interested.
Yeah, I was a part of launching the Central Coast chapter of Poor People's Campaign. We kind of took a step backwards last year. So we haven't been meeting as much, but David and I were a part of going to Washington, D.C. on the 1 million person march on Washington.
Well, Pia, I didn't mean to step on your toes, but I hope that that's some value for people who want to get involved from that angle. I was going to put a friend of mine on the spot, and then I got a note saying that she had raised her hand because she's doing incredible work with several universities and museums. And her program is called Race Relay. And she's a professor also. An adjunct who also travels the country. But I would like her to say what she was going to say, because I was going to put her in the spot with the question. So I will hold my question back and let Denise Hamilton speak to us.
Hello, and I really appreciate the Reverend David in his argument for a theological understanding of why reparations are important. And I also am very encouraged, Matt, by the fact that there is this interfaith group that is trying to deal with this. I'm more interested in undoing harmful policies on a local level, because I see that the idea of getting the US government to put trillions of dollars into something like this is something that is going to be a far-ranging program. And I do race relay circles where I bring various groups together of different ethnicities to talk about how racism has affected them. And we have these ongoing conversations in schools and campuses, and then hopefully engage the community in that argument. But I'm interested also in connecting specifically, Matt, on whether or not you're doing something with working with local restorative justice programs in the schools. So for example, the Oakland restorative program that's helping people to relook at this. I'm always interested in changing people's minds about specific things, like until we understand that our justice system is not just, and we understand that we have this idea that it's about punishment as opposed to rehabilitation, we need to discuss something very basic like that. And I think that the community circles are something that people can, in dealing with local policy, how do we change some very specific things in our local jails,
Yep.
which we can address more than thinking about the Mitch McConnells and the Congress that
Mhm.
isn't working together and delegating trillions of dollars. So I just wanted to know, are you connected to local educational restorative justice programs? And if so, I'd be very interested in making sure that we work together as a fist, as opposed to, you know,
Yes.
one group over
Yep.
there, one group
Yep.
over there, because when we
Mhm.
come together, we are so much stronger and powerful. So
Mhm.
let me
Mhm.
understand how you are working with local educational institutions with restorative justice.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So as a part of implementing restorative justice in the Santa Barbara County School District, all the way up to Lompoc and Santa Barbara and Goleta. So unfortunately, the school district, there's 3 different levels that you could do. So there's 1, which is just kind of disciplinary, 2, which is kind of like teachers and administration, and there's 3, which is full on cultural transformation, implementing restorative justice. Unfortunately, the school districts in our area only wanted to do level 1. That was their choice. So we can go to our school boards and advocate that they expand, put more money behind restorative justice, go to that level 2 administrative aspect, or to that 3rd level cultural aspect. So there's many racial issues happening within our school districts, as many of you may know. Yeah, the work going on in Oakland with Our Joy, which is restorative justice for Oakland youth, was started by the sister of Angela Davis, Fania Davis. Great, powerful work. She's such a great inspiration to me. She was the one that actually originally connected the idea of racial justice is restorative justice for me, and was one of the main leaders at that North Carolina 2017 meeting that I was talking about. And so the idea that restorative justice is an alternative, it asks a different set of questions. It says, what is the healing for the harm that was done, instead of our current system, which says, what is the time for the crime? And so it's our current system is a punitive system. The restorative system is restorative.
And I would just like to interject there before you move away from Santa Barbara schools. As I'm on the executive board for the NAACP, and we routinely, weekly deal with reports of anti-Black violence, especially in middle schools, but also in high schools.
Mm-hmm. And so on a local level, there's an organization I'm involved with, not just that was with a previous organization I was involved with, but I'm involved with an organization called Alternatives to Violence Project. And I think they're the ones leading the way with youth in making an alternative path so that incarceration is not the way. So essentially doing community-based mediations and violence prevention. Alternatives to Violence Project was started after the Attica prison uprising in 72, and the Quakers came alongside the people in the prison and said, hey, we have to figure out an alternative way to live within this violent system. And so they came out with this restorative practice training that anybody can be involved in. We have it at community levels. You don't have to be doing it within the prisons. There's 3 different levels. You can do a basic, you can do an advanced, you can become a facilitator. So those are the 3 different levels. But essentially you're creating an alternative path for, and you're creating restorative practices to be implemented within our community. And this is being expanded into we have teen court now, which is utilizing restorative justice. And then there is restorative justice, what they call restorative court, that one is more aligned with the police department. So some people are a little more skeptical with it, but it's an alternative prevention model to keep homeless folks out of the jails. And so there are our DA. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we want to honor the people who have to leave now. It's 5 o'clock.
Yep.
And we are grateful if you guys are going to spend your time with us so that those who want to stay on can continue this dialogue, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And could I ask Denise Hamilton to please put her contact information, her website on for those who want to plug into Race Relay?
Oh,
yeah,
okay, thank you. And thank you, Matt. I appreciate what you said. And I just hope that this information is gathered data that's shared with other people, because there are all these little islands of things that are working, but we don't all know about it. So thank you.
I know. Thank you for your work.
that everyone who was on today will come back to the next messy conversations and the next and the next and the next.
Yeah, Alternatives to Violence Project is practiced in 143 different countries. It's practiced in 48 of the 50 states. It's practiced in Alaska and Hawaii. I'll leave it to you to figure out which states it's not practiced in. It's a beautiful process to start practicing restorative practices and understand the processes of restorative justice and transformative power. So. I think David and I were talking beforehand, if people want to continue this aspect of the conversation, but talking about indigenous reparations. We of course here are, putting particular focus on Black reparations. Indigenous reparations is what they call the land back movement. And I feel like that is just as much important of a conversation to be discussing here, because as we noted on the outset, that Christianity was the first excuse for both colonization and enslavability on this what they call Turtle Island. And so the idea of land back that it cannot be paid for is a very important notion. So
I'm just curious, David, about your earlier comment, the call to white religious leaders to have these conversations about reparations, which I completely agree with. And I have also seen lots of letters from different Christian groups that have started conversations through interfaith networks about reparations and bringing that to their communities. And I wonder if you know more about that and if that has been helpful in any way that you know of.
I have a document that but I don't have a link to it. I just have a PDF. I don't even know how to do that here, but there's a community that, where conscious white religious leaders began consulting with Black church leaders. And this is why the immoral aspect is so, cleaning out the moral centers. So I can send that, and Matt and I both have had the conversation about Evanston, Illinois, which is also something of a model where religious leaders. Matt, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, we actually met one of the main leaders of that movement, Evanston, Pastor Neighbors, John Neighbors, I believe his name is, in Chicago last summer. We both spoke at the Parliament of World Religions and spoke with Pastor Neighbors there on what that work looked like and the interfaith coalitions that were built. And they actually raised and proved to the city that reparations were needed, but through the interfaith movement. And they raised 55 million or something, maybe 5 million. I think it was 5 million and then 55 million. Initially it was 5 million, and then proved to the city that, hey, there's money behind this. There's effort behind this. And so the interfaith community has a strong moral announcement that they need to make. Yeah, there's an organization in our Santa Barbara area called Clue, and there's also one in LA also that is would be willing to engage this work. I'm not sure other locations across the nation though.
Thank you.
Well, Evanston is primarily focused around housing, isn't it?
Correct. Housing, yes. And the way they do it, the way they fund it, is actually through cannabis taxation. So, which is very interesting for us on the Central Coast, as we're growers of a lot of cannabis here.
Asa, you had something to add?
Yes. Thank you, David and Matt. Really great conversation, and based on all the links I was putting in the chat, a lot of resources to follow up on. And I wanted to just mention that all of those resources will be available on the LibGuide. So I'll post that link again. And then, David, if you would be willing to send that PDF, you could just email it. I'll make sure it's accessible on that guide as well. And any other resources either of you would like to share, we can put them up on that site.
Okay.
There's a great book I'd like to, since we're a school of a lot of therapists, I'm sure there's a few in the crowd here. Reading the book Decolonizing Therapy would be a great start to evolve our practices. Because a lot of diagnoses and historically have been used to continue to colonize. And so how as therapists do we continue to do this work, which I know Antioch is really invested in.
Is there anyone else who has a hand up or a burning desire of any kind?
I was going to share that while the UCC church is by no means, a standard that everyone needs to follow in terms of this reparatory justice work, they did create on their site this educational study guide for the Christian church for the 21st century around reparations. So I definitely will share that with you, Asa, so you can you can take a look at it and also share with the group. I know Reverend Otis Moss and those at Trinity in Chicago are very active around trying to build, Black economic power centers again throughout our country and trying to promote some of this work.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got a quick thing, I think. I want to thank everybody for the conversation. And David, I was really, what was I? Glad, pleased, I don't know. But to hear you talk about the spiritual problem in your presentation, and it was bringing back for me my comments at the beginning that with my students and their sense of moral injury that they are suffering in the face of mass violence. And
you can tell I quoted you, right?
but I'm
serious. I mean, I took a note when you said that.
I'm wondering how you thank you, but I'm wondering how what insight, what tactics, what strategies, so on, that you're aware of, that you utilize to help people become aware of the damage that's being done, the moral injury that's being done when they witness violence, but they remain bystanders.
Yeah, it is as though they are surrendering to violence themselves. So they are also victims, but they're also perpetrators. So there's kind of a dual injury that's happening there.
Is that like Mitch McConnell, who said all those people who were responsible for slavery are dead? We need to move on because we weren't responsible for that. He did never address the fact that they are living off of residual benefits from slavery.
Yeah.
I think, David, David Tripp, if I were to answer that question, I think the spiritual aspect of that is in whiteness, there's a thing that I'm just going to focus on my spirituality. They individualize spirituality. And so the way we do spirituality in a reparative way, in a moral way, is understanding that our spirituality is in connection with land and other people in community. And so again, returning back to that separation of self and others and land. And so when one is separated from their self, so can one find oneself? Can one find community? Can one engage in long-term in community? I would say that is a part of the moral work, and one will start to find themselves when they engage in that.
Yeah, thank you both. I mean, I'm also thinking about Germany's response to the Holocaust, right? And the various tactics and strategies that they've used to name their sins, to use that language, and yet we're seeing you have to stay with the work, because we're seeing some of that work being undone right now.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you.
Any last burning, desired comments someone wants to share? Okay, well, we look forward to seeing everyone again and again and again on the next Messy Conversations.
Hey, I have a last burning desire, if that's okay, Clarence.
Let it burn, let it burn. Come on, bring it.
How do we reconcile the stolen land from the indigenous peoples and also reconcile the need for reparations from the people that we've imported here and monopolized off of their bodies, off of their lives, off of transgenerational trauma? Is there one that takes place or over the other? I know that it doesn't, but I've heard about like land acknowledgement and whatnot, but how does that come into focus for our lived experience and the action that we want to take to kind of propagate healing and community connection and thenceforth?
Let me respond to the second part, and then someone else can take, maybe Matt, get the first part. When it comes to the people that we have, quote unquote, imported and relied upon their slave labor, essentially, in order to for me, and I've been working closely with organizations who are advocates for domestic workers, because they do not have the protections that other people have, and yet their job is what allows other people to have theirs. They are mostly at this point immigrants. They are either Latina, mostly female, Latina or Filipina. In California, in particular, can't speak for other states, but Latina and Filipina. There's no such thing as sick leave. They had to go to work during COVID, and yet they are unprotected. And we have a Democrat governor who has 3 times vetoed any legislation that, and most recently, just a month ago, SB 686, that would give them those protections. I think that for me, it is a moral thing. These women are doing what Black women did. Women, like my ancestors, they're doing the same job with the same degree of disrespect, and so that would be my response. It shows you how different how fragments of different worldviews cannot be congruous all the time, because there was a saying back in the 40s and 50s among Black domestic workers. They would say, Hitler got us out of the white man's kitchen. Now think about that for a minute, because it really is, it's really an applause of Hitler, someone that we don't applaud. But what it's saying is that the immorality of people who claim to be the righteous ones is often obscured because of the righteousness that they are seeking to implement.
Ooh, thank you. I hadn't heard that one before. Thank you for sharing that one. So in a very practical way, the land return, it's not a removal. We can't all just leave and go somewhere else. I don't think that's what the call is. Maybe in some regards, there is a stop stockpiling property, stop seeing property as something of value to, I use the word propertize. So stop propertizing land, stop propertizing humans. And the ways that we can do that is you can pay a moral tax. So yes, we pay property tax, but you also, if you own property, your property goes up in value, and you can pay a tax based upon the way that it goes up in value. Whatever that may be. There's also what they call community land trust, and you as a property owner can put your house in a land trust. You can divest from the possessive investment in whiteness and property, and do that, and then turn the house over to houseless folks, or you can turn it over to indigenous people, or you can turn it over to a homefulness community, which is rehousing community that is a community that's rooted in reparations out of the Bay Area called Poor Magazine. There are a bunch of poor, Black, disabled, homeless moms that took over housing and started a homefulness project. And so just powerful work like that. And so opening your doors to other people, getting people off the streets, like that's we can see people as humans. Like that's we are in the work of or not even rehumanizing. It's just acknowledging humans. Like we have been trained to not acknowledge humans, the humanity of others. And so part of it is that work. Like if you have a spare bedroom, be like, hey, I have a place to stay for a couple of days. Would you like to lay your head somewhere warm? It's getting out of that contractual kind of consumptive nature is those are some key practical ways that I can answer that question as far as like land and property.
Can I
Okay.
speak?
Yeah.
Okay. In addition to what Matt and David just said, and I think that's very powerful in terms of specific examples, I hear this all the time. I hear people saying, what can I, my little thing is so small. Everyone has their own sphere of influence. Everyone. So you just look at what's going on in your neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods and start working with your local congresspeople and get on their backs because they're supposed to represent you. And what are they doing? You have influence where you work, where you shop, where you socialize. Don't think that you have to contact Washington and make someone in Washington do something. Every single person is very powerful in their own sphere. And that's all I want to say, because I hear this all the time. And I can't give you more specifics than what Matt and David just gave you. But open your eyes, and you can do it. You can do it. So thank you so much for wanting to do it. Just realize the power that you already have. Thank you.
And Matt, you spoke earlier about monumentalizing. Why can't the first step be that we give back all the sacred places that the indigenous people had, assaulted or simply taken, the children's cemeteries that are like next to highway being destroyed and dishonored, if they would just start that first, maybe there would be other ways, that and could be honored, from the indigenous perspective.
In our community here in Santa Barbara, two places I've been heard that were sacred to the Chumash people are two of the most elite areas in all of California. Montecito, there's a place called Cold Springs. There was that spring was very sacred area for them. And then also an area called Hope Ranch, which is now just houses that are bucku, like just millions, 10, 15, $20 million houses, and so these lands were the Chumash were erased from not that long ago. This was 20s, 30s. This wasn't 1700s, 1800s. There's still active memories of Chumash people in this Hope Ranch area, and now it is just mansions. And so we have to take a look at those areas, and there's a deep investment in the possessiveness that whiteness affords. So
and let me just add that if you know somebody who is a nanny or does elder care or supports as a job a person with a disability, ask them what their day was like. Ask them what their month was like. Ask them how much respect they got.
Sounds good. We should do it for sure. Just want to remind everyone that next Monday we have the Trans Remembrance Day messy conversation. So please join us then, as well as the next following messy conversations. Come on back, come on back.
And bring a friend.
Yeah, bring cousin Lou and Uncle Charlie.
And invite David and I to come speak to your classrooms or to your communities or whatever it is. We want to get this message out there. Both of us have podcasts that we both work on and uplift other people's messages as well too. So we're all about amplification and getting it out to the masses. So let's figure out ways to collaborate and connect with one another.
Do not say that in a room with Dr. Elaine Parker Gills in it. She will do off so quickly. You won't know what happened.
I'm already on it.
I feel like I just got volunteered, Matt.
Sorry, Dave.
Both of you. And to continue in that vein, I think it's very important that you all join us next week. There are so many areas that we have to stand tall and together on. So
your fans are asking for your podcast in the chat.
Thank you. Mine's called the Changemaker Podcast by Matt Lowe. And David, I'll let you share yours.
Yeah, mine is titled God is Not an Asshole. And we drop episodes down every Friday, so it's a weekly show. And our most recent show, I hope the title just kind of explains itself, but our most recent interviews with a woman, a Jewish woman who calls herself a recovered Zionist. So that's an interesting, intriguing topic.
He's awesome.
It's about moving away from dogmatism, people who have liberated from dogmatism. All of our shows are, our podcasts, in a way, Matt's are too.
And we both have websites. David is his name and mine is changemakermatt.com. And if you're looking for spiritual community, come to Beloved Community Church on Sundays at 10 a.m. We meet every week on Zoom and once a month in person.
Well, did you put that Zoom address in for us?
There's a sign up. Do you have the email link to the email sign up, David?
Yeah, I'll grab that. So yeah, we have the most amazing people. It's not a huge group, but it's people in different parts of the country who just have some moral agreement and find refuge in each other.
You don't have to be Christian. We have Jewish friends that join us, atheist friends that join us, Muslim friends that join us.
Yeah.
Quakers, Baptists, all of them.
Yep.
Words, thoughts, anyone?
just a very special thank you, both of you.
Thank you, Elaine, for hosting us. I really appreciate it.
was,
Thank you, Clarence.
It was amazing.
Yes, Matt, we must continue these conversations
Yes,
off
sir.
well.
David and Matt, I'd like to again to thank you both. It was I was just quietly listening to all these, very powerful, compelling and moving presentations. It actually sent us a sense of urgency that we have to spread the word. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You know what? Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Clarence. Thank you for inviting us. Technically, you invited me and I invited Matt.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
But I don't think you regret it. Anybody regrets it. Matt's been my friend for some years now, and I really believe in him.
And see, all this time we didn't know you had friends, but we were grateful that you brought Matt to us.
Well, I didn't say friends, plural, but
I keep him busy.